Hi, everyone, and welcome to a review of Unit 1, Lesson 1 homework that you guys completed in Week 2. So the plan for this brief video is I will quickly review the answers for Lesson 1. In particular, I'm only going to focus on the two areas that I saw that needed a bit more extra attention. Then I'll introduce some differences between some similar words in Lesson 1, and also you'll be able to see real examples of how those specific words are actually used. At the end, there'll be a self-assessment where you're going to identify whether the vocabulary used is correctly used or incorrectly used. So let's begin. The first thing I did want to mention is that a few students in both of my classes didn't necessarily complete the first exercise correctly. The word chart that you needed to complete should be filled only from the words that are shared on this first page. So as I reviewed in class, you can see that the base words this week are community, participation, factor, cultural, and response. But these words, participation, factor, cultural, and response, have different word families that you'll need to put into this chart. Now, the chart that you see in front is the answer key. Just to clarify, community does have different word forms, but because we're only going on what the book is sharing as word families, these are the only word families that you're responsible for knowing and for studying. Jumping back to the correct word chart, I did want to point out that participation as well as participant are nouns. That participatory and participating is an adjective. Sometimes the ing can make someone think it's a verb form, but in fact, adjectives can take on an ing form, as well as if you look here, the word cultured has an ed form, but that's going to be the adjective form of the word. If you do have any questions, definitely jump into any of my office hours, and I am glad to help. So moving on, the comprehension check of matching of the definitions was great. I did want to jump to the second exercise. Many of you did an excellent job. I think there was one or two students that did have problems with how to solve this kind of exercise. Again, the purpose is to look at each line. So in this case, number 1, the first line is group, community, family, and building. And in this case, to understand which word does not belong, first, it's logical to look for the synonyms. So as we can see here, group, community, and family are synonyms, which means building is the odd one out. Now, many of you did excellent with this activity. Again, this was just noticing prepositions. There's an expression in English language teaching, we use collocations. Collocations are words that are frequently used together. Not to create a different meaning like a phrasal verb, but these are words that are just naturally often used together. In this case, we're seeing that there are certain prepositions that can be used often with some of our vocabulary words this week. So as you can see here, community in the reading text is used with the preposition of. This is a common expression, community of, maybe community of neighbors, community of teacher, community of students, as well as the noun participation often uses the preposition in to have participation in a program, as well as we use this with the verb form to participate in something. Next, we see that the word factor, the noun factor, is often used with the preposition in, so a factor in reducing crime, a factor in increasing success. Then many of you identified that cultural does not have a preposition that is used with it, simply because cultural is an adjective. So what's going to often follow the word cultural is going to be a noun, in this case, backgrounds. And then lastly, you'll see that the noun response is often used with the preposition to. You usually give a response to something or to a person. And we're almost at the final exercise here. So in this exercise, many of you did it very correctly, but there was some who struggled with numbers 2, 3, and 4. So we'll focus on that. If we look at number 2, before we go on our vacation, we have to plan and factor in all the variables that could affect our trip. Now here, we can see that factor in this sentence is following the helping verb, which is have to. Have to is a modal, so it is essentially a verb, but it's in a verb that can follow an infinitive. So here we have to plan and have to factor. So this would be an infinitive. So if you answered for number 2, if you answered it as a verb, you were correct. Number 3, my math teacher told me that I failed the quiz because I forgot to factor in the right numbers. Again, just like number 2, factor here is going to be an infinitive. It is following a verb, but it is in a noun form, in a verb form. And number 4, if you factor in the amount of money we spent on the treats, you'll see here that factor is in the verb position of the sentence. If starting a conditional clause, you is the subject, and then naturally factor is going to be the verb. So at the top, just to remind you, there are examples of the noun form as well as the verb form, and you can see here a little hint that if you see this helping verb have to, that factor is going to be used in the verb form in the sentence. Okay, so the next part of your homework last week was to write an original paragraph, and I noticed that many students who were using the word factor, whether it was a noun or a verb, were actually not using it correctly. So first I wanted to clarify the meaning. The factor as a noun means something that helps produce or influence a result. And in this way, factor is very close to the word reason. Now, factor as a verb means to consider or to include something in making a judgment. So when do we actually use these words? Let's see a context. So first, an example of how it's used in noun form. There are several factors that contribute to a first-year student's success, or a growing economy is a factor in the country's recent development. So again, because it's a noun, it can be used both as a plural form or as a singular form. After this video, I will be posting 2 websites that will share with you other collocations, which again are phrases that are often used with this word factor. If you are wondering how to use factor as a verb, which I did notice that no student in any of my classes attempted, it is a really nice verb. So here's an example. When planning your study schedule, it's important to factor in. You'll see here, in is a preposition often used with the verb factor. It's important to factor in time that you will want to relax and spend time with family. Okay. A few other words that I did want to review again, just to kind of give you the definition if you haven't already looked it up by yourself. Participation is that action of being in an event. Participant is obviously the person in the event. Participatory is a completely different meaning. It's an adjective which means providing an opportunity for people to take part in something, as well as participating as an adjective means taking part in something. Now, cultural as an adjective is relating to a specific group of people, habits, and their habits and traditions. Cultured as an adjective means to have good taste, a good education, or even a good style. And response as a noun is something that is said or written as a reply. In some cases, this can be replies to a survey. But responsive as an adjective is reacting in a desired or a positive way to something else. So I just wanted to point out here that, again, depending on the word form in that word family, the meaning is very different than that base word that you study the definitions for. And again, so here's some example sentences in case you were wondering how to use participatory. So governments that allow for its citizens to openly debate a new law is a great example of participatory governance. Another example, when teachers are too dominant in the class, it demonstrates that they don't value a participatory approach to learning. Now, I've highlighted participatory governance because, again, that is a collocation. You can see this frequently used with the word participatory, as well as approach. Lastly, you'll see participating. AUAF is one of the participating universities in national moot courts in Afghanistan, as well as the Taj Palace was the participating hotel in the Raisina conference last January in Delhi. And in case you were wondering how to use cultured versus cultural, in this first example, some people believe that going to university makes a person more cultured. A little reminder, we don't refer to a person as being cultural, but we do refer to them being cultured if we think they, again, are very educated, know a lot about the world. The next example of cultured, it was obvious by the way she spoke and acted that she was she was worldly and very cultured. So again, here, cultured is close to a synonym of being educated, but it's a broader sense of being educated about the world and lots of different things. Now, lastly, how to use cultural, another adjective in a sentence. I wish people spent less time noticing cultural differences between humans. Cultural differences is probably the most commonly used collocation with the adjective cultural. Um, as well as the next, I think it's important for everyone to study their cultural heritage. And in this expression, cultural heritage would be the cultural background of a person, what they inherit from their ancestors. And just to cover response and responsive, so again, I have been waiting for hours for my teacher's response to my email. Response as a noun is often followed by the preposition to, but we can also see the preposition about being used with this noun as well. I'm currently waiting for a response about my scholarship application. And lastly, if you were wondering how to use the adjective form responsive, the student seemed very responsive when the teacher said there would be no exams in the course. So remember, guys, responsive as an adjective means to respond in a very positive way. We'll look at the last example. The people were not responsive to the president's suggestion to reform the Constitution. Okay, so we'll take a moment and I'd like you to read the sentences and you're going to decide if they are correct or incorrect. In your mind, be prepared to explain why. I'll be explaining the answers in just a moment, so if I were you, I would pause the video, read each sentence, and decide, is the vocabulary word correct or is it incorrect in a sentence? Pause the video now because I'll be showing you the answers in just a second. Okay, so I hope you pause the video. Going through the answers, the first sentence, students should factor in the cost of transportation when they consider to study at AUAF. Correct. So here, factor is being used as the verb, and it is accurately used. They should include or consider something when making a judgment. Number two, when I started university, I entered into a community of academics. Also correct, you see here that the noun community also is followed by the preposition of, and it's being correctly used. Number three, some people think it's important to be cultural. This is incorrect. Again, cultured is going to be the correct form needed here because it refers to good taste and knowledge, and because it's describing people. Number four, I think Roshan is a participating sponsor of the big football match. Yes, we can see here participating as an adjective means to be involved in an event. And then number five, my teacher gave me a responsive that I did not agree with. So here it's incorrect. Response is the correct form needed because we needed a noun form. How we know we need a noun form. If we look here, there's a nice little clue. Would we use a, which is an indefinite article in English? What comes after it is going to be a noun or a noun phrase. And here would be an adjective form. So we'll need a noun. Okay, guys, I hope you found this short lecture useful. I'll be doing this every week for the different lessons that we study in vocabulary class. I hope you guys are well, and I look forward to seeing you in our classes this week. Take care. Allah Hafiz.